Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'll introduce you to Jerry now, who is the host of tonight's show.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Hello and good evening. Welcome to everyone to yet another webinar from Expats Portugal. Lovely to see some old faces, familiar faces. Oh, hello, great to see you. We haven't seen you for a while, so it's really lovely. We have a fairly complicated subject to cover tonight, taxation. We all have to pay it. I noticed a quote on Ricardo's website, which says you must pay taxes, but there's no law that says you've got to leave a tip. So I presume we can take from that Ricardo's going to ensure we don't have to pay a tip. But I have another quotation to throw back at you, Ricardo, and it said says, day in and day out, your tax accountant can make or lose you more money than any single person in your life, with the possible exception of your kids. So no pressure on you tonight, Ricardo, but you know, that's what you're up against. What we're going to do, one moment I'm going to hand you over to Ricardo. He's going to give us, tell us a little bit about his company, and then give us an overview of taxation in Portugal, particularly what is NHR, what are the procedures for paying tax, the filing requirements, and so on. Should you engage an accountant, and if so, what does that involve? What type of incomes are taxable? What are the tax-free limits? And how to take advantage of NHR whilst doing business in Portugal. So that will be our first section, and please feel free to chip in with your questions on the chat. We'll do our best to get those answered. And then in the second part of tonight, we're going to move on to a USA-specific conversation when I'm going to hand over to Trevor. And a warm welcome to Trevor in his first venture out with us on a webinar. Delighted to welcome Trevor and his wife Shannon, who have become part of our team. And Trevor's going to take up the baton with regard to US tax and US tax filing and so on. So that's me done. Ricardo, over to you, please. Hello, good evening, welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Trevor. Well, I'm Ricardo. I've been an accountant in Portugal for the last nearly 25 years. I have my own company with a team of 33 people that are used to deal with international clients. Over nearly 100% of our clients are international and based on different countries or different parts of Portugal. We have a team which is fluent in English, fluent in French, so that we can handle the international clients. Despite the fact that we are based in the Algarve, like I said, we have clients from all over the country and covered areas, from individual taxation like the personal income tax, the non-habitual residency, to local lodging, or even company accountancy. We cover most of the areas in terms of tax and social security in Portugal. I'm pleased that Jerry has invited us to be here, and I'll try to explain and clarify some of the questions you may have. Okay, so as Jerry was saying, a lot of the people that are in the room, I suppose, that have heard about the non-habitual residency, and that's one of the things that we would also try to explain, how to get the NHR and the roadmap to get the NHR, because I suppose it's something that most of the expats here in this room will benefit from. A lot of people ask the question if they qualify for the NHR. Sometimes people make the confusion if that's between the residency and the NHR. The NHR is not a residency program. The NHR is just a tax status. And for you to qualify for the NHR, the only thing that you need is that you haven't been tax resident in Portugal over the last 5 years. Okay, so anyone that hasn't been tax resident over the last 5 years can qualify for the NHR, as we will see during the presentation. Whether you will be able to benefit or not from all the advantage of the NHR, that will depend on the type of incomes that you have. But in most cases, you will benefit, and it's always better to have the NHR status than not having, because the question is, when you apply for the NHR, each year when you do the tax return, you can choose the way you want to be taxed, whether through the normal rules or through the NHR rules, whatever it's more beneficial, which normally it's the NHR, but we'll go there in a minute. But if you don't have the NHR status, then you have no option. You will just have to be taxed under the normal Portuguese tax rates, and you won't have the exemptions that normally Portuguese tax rates, and you won't have the exemptions that normally are allowed on the NHR status. Okay, here we go. This is who we are. Like I said, a team of accountants based in the Algarve with experience in dealing with international clients. The services that we do, I mean, I won't be too exhaustive. I already mentioned. In terms of the NHR roadmap, the first step when you come to Portugal is, or even before you come to Portugal, is to get your fiscal number, the NIF. Normally, you appoint a fiscal representative. Unless you are a EU citizen, you are able to do it without a fiscal representative. To get the fiscal number, you just need to have a copy of a passport and a utility bill from your home address, okay? Because the NIF always is issued with your foreign address, not the Portuguese address. Then later, when you apply for residency, either a EU residence certificate, if you are a EU citizen, which is much simpler, you don't need to go through the CEF, you just go to the local council, and with the proof of your residency, either rental contract deeds or an attestation from the junta, you go to the council and you get the EU residence certificate, which we call the CRUE, right? Which is Certificado Residente da União Europeia. So that's a simple process. If you are going through CEF, then the application is totally different. You need to apply and get a D7 visa or a D2 visa, whatever it's more adequate to your circumstances. And normally, I always recommend that you appoint a lawyer to help you with the visa, or an immigration company like the one that works with Expats Portugal, to help you and assist you with the residency application. After you getting the residency, you then need to inform the tax authorities that you live in Portugal. This is not an automatic process. The CEF or the council is not linked with the tax office. So the tax office will not know that you are tax resident here until you tell them. And by law, you are supposed to tell them, like anyone else, you are supposed to inform the tax authorities of your change of address within 60 days. So if you got your visa or if you got your residence certificate, you should tell the tax authorities within 60 days. And at that point, change the address on your NIF. So when you change the address on your NIF and the address is now Portugal, that means that you are tax resident. And from that date, you are supposed to declare your worldwide income in Portugal because you are a tax resident. People ask many times the question about when is the date that you will become tax resident. Sometimes I have people that say, well, we've been living in Portugal and waiting for CEF for 6 months or more, and are we not tax resident because we've been spending more than the 6 months in Portugal in 1 year? So the law says that we should be tax resident. That is correct, but the problem is, in practical terms, I cannot change your address on your fiscal number until I have your residency permit. So until that stage, it's not possible to change the address on the NIF, which means that you are not allowed to declare as a resident. Your tax return will not be accepted if you declare that you are resident, because on the file of the tax office, the NIF, it says that you are non-resident. So going back to the NHR roadmap, after you change your address on the NIF and you become a resident, that's when you can apply for the non-habitual residency, okay? The non-habitual residency, again, gives you several tax benefits and special tax rates during a period of 10 years. It's not renewable, so it will be those 10 years. It allows you to be out of the country. For instance, if you decide that you're going to immigrate to Italy for a couple of years, I don't know why you will leave Portugal, but people sometimes have circumstances in their lives. So if you immigrate during those 10 years, the 10 years are not extended. You just lose the years that you were out. So you become a tax resident in Portugal in 2022. The NHR will last from 2022 till the end of 2031. If in 2025 you decide to go to Italy and return in 2027, you will have in 2027 until 2031. So you still have those years left. You just lose the ones that you were away. Again, the same way as the tax authorities are not linked with the CEF or with the council, the fact that you become a tax resident and apply for the NHR doesn't automatically tells the UK authorities, the HMRC or the US tax authorities, that you are no longer tax resident there. You need to apply, for instance, with the HMRC, if it's the case with the UK, or the Ireland Revenue with the Irish clients. You need to inform them that you are tax resident in Portugal. And for that, you need to obtain tax resident certificate in Portugal. You need to join the double tax form and send to the HMRC, for instance, to achieve the no tax code so that you can stop being taxed at source on your pension if you have a private pension. Again, this is something that we can help you with, but you need to bear in mind that this is dependent on the ties you have with that country. For instance, with the UK, it depends with the number of ties you will have there, but it's pretty straightforward. With the US, as a lot of you know, if you are Americans, you will always pay tax in America while you are Americans. I'm sorry, it's life. So in terms of the non-habitual residency, how to get it, this is the way forward. This slide is just to reinforce what I already said. The scheme is, the NHR was established in 2009. We started having the first applicants successfully in 2013. It was recently, there were some changes in 2020 because until anyone that was resident until 31st of March 2020, the tax on the pension was 0. And after 31st of March 2020, it started to be 10%. When there are changes to the NHR, and I don't expect any changes soon, but if there are in the future, normally the changes only apply from that date onwards, which means that anyone that has the NHR from previous dates will normally keep the same rights, because that's normally on the Portuguese law. When you start a law, it should only have effects from that date. So for instance, anyone that was resident in Portugal since 2019 and as the NHR, they still pay no tax on their pensions. Anyone that has the NHR after 31st of March 2020, they do pay the 10%, okay? Again, people ask many times if the NHR require any property investment in Portugal because they confuse it with a residency program. This is not a residency program. The only requirement is that you haven't been tax resident over the last 5 years. In terms of property investment, that is mostly for the golden visa. And the golden visa, yes, that is a residency program, which is based on the investment you make on the property purchase in Portugal or on a company investment. There are different ways of getting the golden visa. My personal opinion, for most of the people on here, which are American or EU, I don't see a big advantage because the process will take as much time or even more than the D7, and people don't need to invest that amount of money to get a visa. They will still get it if they go through the normal D7 or D2 visas. In terms of the minimum time that you are required to be in Portugal to become an NHR, like I said, once you have the visa or the EU residence certificate from the council, you can then change your NIF and you can become an NHR. The residency rules in Portugal are very vague in terms of tax. I mean, you are residents depending on different circumstances. For instance, you could be away of the country, and just the fact that this is where you have your home and this is where you have your household at the end of the year, this could be one of the factors to deem you as a resident. What I normally say to clients is, obviously it depends on your lifestyle, but if you are spending more time in another country, it's not Portugal that you should worry about, because Portugal, very likely they won't do anything because they don't know that you are spending more than 6 months out of the country. But the other country where you are, that is a different circumstance. It could trigger residency in another country. So it won't be a problem from Portugal, but it could be a problem in the other country. On the other hand, the Portugal residency rules imply that you shouldn't be out of Portugal more than 6 consecutive months in one calendar year. So that's something that you need to consider. Again, on the last year of residency, when it comes to renew the residency at CEF, you are also supposed to spend more than 8 of the last 12 months in the country. So these things you need to consider on your lifestyle, because some people are, I know most of you will want to come and live and spend all the time in Portugal, but others will want to also be traveling within Europe. What you need to consider is, in terms of tax, until you tell the Portuguese tax authorities that you move somewhere else, you will have the tax residency here and the tax obligations here. If at the same time you are spending more than 6 months in France or another country, it could be that if they find, they will also say that you are tax resident there, and that could be an issue. A question that a lot of people ask in terms of inheritance tax and gift tax. I mean, there's no inheritance tax in Portugal. So it's not even a taxable event in terms of my tax return. I don't need to declare anything that I inherit or anything that it was gifted to me. However, there are stamp duty on certain inheritance or gifts. So if I inherit something from my parents, a property, for instance, I will pay the stamp duty, which is 0.8%. It's very low, very little, and it's based on the tax value of the property, not on the commercial value. So that's what I pay. It's very little. But if, for instance, I was inheriting from someone that was not on direct line, then the stamp duty would be 10%. Again, there is no inheritance tax, and this is not a link to residency. So anyone that inherits things in Portugal won't pay the tax. However, for instance, if you are a UK citizen, and if you are inherit something, you're not resident in Portugal, you're resident in the UK, and you are inherited something in Portugal, you pay the stamp duty here, and then you should declare it in the UK. Whether the UK will get that information or not, but you will always have to consider the country where you are resident. So if you are resident in a country where you need to declare those inheritance or those gifts, you will be eventually taxed in those countries. It always depends where you are resident. But for Portugal, irrespective of your residency, the fact that you have bank accounts or other assets, you won't pay any inheritance tax. You eventually pay a little bit of stamp duty if there is a house, for instance, or a car. The same way with the gift tax. Okay. There's no wealth tax in Portugal. There is an additional council tax. Again, the council tax in Portugal is very low, but if you have the property in a company name, or in case it's your own property and you have a property that's worth more than 600,000 euros, and I'm talking always tax value, because the tax value is normally a lot less than the commercial value. So if you have a property, you have an allowance of 600,000, and above that allowance, you pay an additional council tax. So that's the most close to wealth tax, because wealth tax there isn't in Portugal, is another advantage of living here. And again, even if you pay the council tax and the additional council tax, which is double the council tax in Portugal is so low that it will be a lot less than, for instance, what you currently pay in the UK. If you don't have any income at the moment, can you still apply for the NHR? Yes, the NHR, it's available for anyone that hasn't been tax resident even over the last 5 years. And I always suggest that you apply, even if in that moment it's not something that you think that it will benefit you. I always remember a couple that came into my office where she didn't have any pension. So he had the pensions, he applied for the NHR, she didn't. She didn't have any pensions. Then he died, she inherited his pension, and now she's taxed at the progressive tax rates because she didn't have the NHR. If she had the NHR, the pension would be tax-free. Okay, so always plan ahead. So always apply for the NHR, even if at that moment it doesn't look attractive. I think we are finishing. So some people are coming to Portugal to do business. Fortunately, there is also people doing business. Some of them are doing it as self-employed. Some of them incorporate a company. This is what I normally suggest to my clients. Unless your investment on your business is significant, I always recommend that you start as self-employed. The reason being that the first 12 months, you have an exemption on Social Security payments. Also, on the first year, tax year, you have 50% discounts on the tax rate. So normally the tax rate is 15%, because your tax rate, like I said, for business, if it's an eligible occupation, is 20, but on the self-employment, you are not taxed on 100% of your income. You are taxed on 75% of your gross income. So if you multiply 75 by 20, you have 15%. So that's the normal rate. If you have no other income in the first year, it also means that you will have a discount of 50%, which means that you will be taxed on an average of 7.5%. Okay, 7.5% tax on year one. No Social Security on the first 12 months. So I always say first register as a sole trader, self-employed, and then after 12 months, depending on your income, we will look at either continue with self-employment or incorporate a company. If we incorporate a company under fiscal transparency regime, you will be taxed on 20% of the profits, which means that there will be some deductions. So it's not your gross income. On self-employment, we were talking about gross income. Here, we're talking about profits. And then there's no tax on dividends. All the money belongs to you, and you can take it or not from the company without further tax. And with a company, because you will have a low salary, we would be talking about Social Security costs of about 3,500 euros a year. As self-employed, you have the 12-month exemption, but after that, you could be paying something like 15% Social Security. So it would mean 15% tax plus 15% Social Security. It might be cheaper to do it through a company. It really depends on how you, how much money, who are your clients, what are your costs. But that's something that we can advise you on. And again, you need to understand that there are good opportunities if you are doing business in Portugal. if your occupation is eligible under the NHR. For instance, most of the IT digital nomads are covered on the list. But for instance, if you were an accountant, it's not covered. So it means you need to see if on the list of eligible occupations, if your job it's eligible or not, because otherwise the tax rates will not be these ones. It will be the progressive tax rates. And that's it with our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow, thank you, Ricardo. What a lot of information to absorb. Thank you very much for that. We will actually send out, Ricardo, if you're okay with it, we will email out this presentation.
Yep, that's fine.
To all of the participants. We can also make it available on our forum later. If you're okay with that, Ricardo.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And I believe you and you have there's a further presentation which we'll send out specifically about
that's
NHR,
an NHR
right?
guide, which it details what is the tax on each different type of income. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now we have quite a few questions, but before we before we move off the general area of taxation, there's one question that's come up regarding the timing of NHR from Vicky.
Yeah, I saw it. If we apply in November, the self-appointment is mid-October, then 2022 counts as one of the 10 years of NHR benefits.
Okay.
Well, you have 60 days. So if you get your self-appointment in mid-October, technically, it shouldn't be a problem if you only change your address on the NIF in January, and that way you will be tax resident from 2023, and your NHR will last until the end of 2032. That's what I would say that you should do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm saying this, but because the system is not linked, the SEF and the tax authorities, we don't know if in the future they will be linked or if they will have access to that information. But in the worst case scenario, if that happens in the future, the only thing that would happen is that you would have to be resident from 2022 and not 2023. Okay.
Right. Thank you. And can I just ask you a few general questions? The procedures for paying tax, the filing requirements, the timing, and so on. The tax year is the calendar year, right?
Correct. So, for instance, let's say Vicky comes to Portugal in November and she becomes tax resident in November. So the filing period is normally the 1st of April till the end of June. And in 2023, she will declare only from the moment she was tax resident. So it will only be the income from November till the 31st of December. One of the things that you need to bear in mind is that when we submit the tax return, by default, it covers the whole year. So if it covers the whole year, you need to tell them that you are tax resident only from November until the 31st of December, and just say that you are using the split year treatment. This could be important, especially if you have income that you received just before becoming resident that you don't want to report to Portugal, that would generate a tax bill. So it's important that you refer that on the tax return. The filing period, like I said, is 1st of April till the end of June. The tax bill, if you have any tax to pay, it's August. And the tax return needs to be done electronically through the tax portal. So it's not in paper, there's no papers. It's all done electronically through the tax portal. Okay.
Right. And that neatly leads into the next question, because it can all be done online through the tax portal. But there are elements that can be deducted. And an item that comes up very often on our webinars is why we are asked to give our fiscal number when we make a purchase or when we pick up our medicine or whatever.
Yep.
So perhaps you could just explain that a little bit to us, and the benefits of doing that.
So there are different sections in terms of tax deductions. you have the general expenses, just the fact that you need to ask for invoice with your fiscal number. So just the fact that you receive an electricity bill with your fiscal number, that's already counting as general expenses.
Okay.
The general expenses, you have 30% deduction with a cap of 250 euros. So you don't need to keep asking for invoices with your NIF at the supermarket or anything like that, because once you reach roughly 800 euros a year, the 250 euros, that's it. Then where you should ask for invoice definitely is with your NIF. It's on every time you go to the doctor, every time you go to the pharmacy, because then you get 15% of the expenditure with a cap of 1,000 euros. I think it used to be 1,500. I think now it's 1,000. Obviously, your health insurance will also have your NIF, so eventually you could easily as well. Hope not. Hope you don't have many bills from the doctor, but with the health insurance, you could easily reach to the cap. And then the Portuguese tax authorities give, the government is very clever. They ask you to work on their behalf. So if you ask for invoices from different sectors like restaurants, hotels, hairdressers, car garages, even computer stores, basically these were the sectors where the government identified that people normally don't issue an invoice. I mean, it's very common in Portugal. I'm not saying you go to a car dealer, but if you go to a local garage, the guy might say, well, for me to repair your car, it's 1,000 euros. But if you want an invoice, it's going to be plus VAT. So what the government is saying, I mean, if you ask for invoice in all these sectors, in restaurants, because there's a lot of restaurants that normally would not issue an invoice. If you ask for invoices on all these sectors, they will give you 15% of the VAT you pay. It's not a lot. It seems a lot, but it's not a lot, because if you, I mean, if it's a computer, it could be some money, because if you buy a computer for 500 euros, 165 euros is VAT, so you would get 15% of that. You might get 20 euros. But if it's a meal, and you pay 20 euros, the VAT there might be 4 euros. So 15% of that is very little. We talk about cents. But obviously every cent counts. Now, the other issue is that whether you're going to be able to deduct these costs or not, because these tax deductions will only be applicable first if you pay tax. So if you're not paying tax, they won't give you this money. Secondly, if you are taxed at the progressive tax rate. So if your pension, for instance, you only have pension which is taxed at 10% autonomous rates, or if you have income from your business activity which is taxed at 20%, so 20 of 75, for instance. But if you are using the autonomous rate of taxation, these deductions will not show on your tax bill. So they are irrelevant. But however, if you have any type of income that is taxed under the progressive tax rates, then yes, you will be able to offset the deductions.
And if you've given your fiscal number, do you still need to claim the amount, or is it automatically recorded against your fiscal number?
It will be automatically recorded against your fiscal number. There's a section on the tax portal which is called the e-fatura. Fatura means invoice, so e-fatura, where you can see all your invoices. And what happens is, in most cases, so if you go to a pharmacy, it should go automatically to your health expenses, but you need to say whether you had a medical prescription or not, because the deductions are different in each case. If you go for a restaurant, it should go automatically to the restaurant side section. However, if that restaurant has more than one activity code, you need to press there on the tax portal. You need to choose which section do you want it to go, because I mean, if I go to, let's say, if I go to Wells, which is a pharmacy that is part of Continent supermarkets. If I get an invoice from Wells, quite often, because I might need to choose that refers to pharmacy, and that refers to health expense. So I'll do most of the expenses are automatically go to each section. Some of them you still need to go there to confirm which section they should go. But again, all the expenses are there. So they are registered against your fiscal number. So they are all there. Whether you're going to use them or not, it depends if you go there and click on the right buttons on those that are questionable, and whether you pay tax or not.
Yeah. And this is where it would be advisory to have an accountant involved to do this filing for you.
Eventually,
yes?
yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I think that's an interesting point, because if you could just give us an indication of the cost, say with AFM, just I know there are all kinds of conditions and so on, but just basically as, you know, average Joe, what does it cost to go to someone like you and have their tax filings handled by you on an annual basis?
Normally, what we charge per year is 350 euros plus VAT to do the tax return. Includes 30 minutes consultation and clear any questions you may have. It includes all that, not only submitting the tax return, but also explaining it, doing tax assessments, translating the documents if necessary. I mean, but there are various, there will be all sorts of rates. You will have accountants that will charge a lot less, and others that will charge a lot more. That's what we normally charge to our clients, 350 plus VAT.
Okay. Thank you. Can we just briefly, I know this is a very complicated issue, but what types of income are taxable? We've talked about pensions, we've talked, you know, earnings in Portugal. What about things like earnings from managing business overseas or something?
Okay, that's interesting. That's one of the things that Portugal is actually, this program is actually, could be a tax haven. Let's say you have a UK company and you are drawing dividends. If you are drawing dividends, the double tax agreement between Portugal and the UK, it will state that the dividend is taxed in the country of source, okay? So the dividend is from a UK company, it should be taxed there. What happens is that the HMRC, because you're non-resident, they will not tax it. And it happens in many countries like this. In Portugal, because you have the NHR status, this dividend will also not be taxed. So you would be getting a dividend from your UK company, and this dividend will not be taxed, neither in Portugal, neither in the UK. For instance, that's one of the advantages of the NHR. The same applies to interests, because interest, I'll do most of the applications on at the moment. It might rise now because of the interest rates are rising, but people don't get much interest. But interest, again, it will not be taxed neither in the country. Normally, it's not taxed neither in the country of source, neither in Portugal. But capital gains normally are taxed. They will be taxed in Portugal if it's capital gains from financial assets. And they will be taxed at 28% if it's the autonomous rates, or per the progressive tax rates. There is also one new law that is coming into force in 2023, which says that shares and other financial applications, if you hold them for less than 1 year, and if your income is higher than 75,000 euros per year, you will be taxed not at 28%, but at 48%. And that's huge. That's a lot. And that's something that obviously people need to consider if they are dealing with the stock markets transactions. Again, these will be coming to force on the 1st of January 2023.
Right. Okay. I heard recently that for capital gains, there are certain schemes if you reinvest the capital in pension schemes and so on, where it's non-taxable.
But that's only regarding to property. So if you have a property, and that's your main residency, you are allowed to reinvest. So in Portugal, not like in other countries, in your main residency, you pay tax on your capital gain. However, you have the opportunity to reinvest to avoid the taxation or to lower the taxation. The reinvestment can be done into another property, which becomes your main residency, and that property can be located anywhere in the EU, and you have 3 years to make that reinvestment, or can also be done through a financial product which pays capital, like a life insurance, where it needs to pay capital and not more than 7.5% a year of capital. And for these, you have 6 months to reinvest. So you could reinvest half on a product and half on a house. I'll do, as long as you do the investment on the financial product within 6 months and the investment on the property within 3 years.
Within 3 years. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And can we touch a little bit on tax-free limits? Let's suppose, I don't know, let's suppose someone earns 20,000 euros a year. Is there a tax-free limit?
Well, there is an allowance. You have a specific allowance of 4,104 euros, which is very low.
Yes. Okay.
But for instance, if this is why you need an accountant. You need to check and make a simulation each year because the situation can vary depending on different factors. For instance, you have the allowance of 4,104. If you earn 10,000 euros, so that means that 6,000 are taxable. And these 6,000, if I choose to tax it at 10% autonomous rate, because you have the NHR, you will pay the 600 euros. However, I might choose to be taxed under the progressive tax rates because you will have other allowances and you have the deduction of the medical bills, the general expenses, and eventually you pay no tax or pay less than the 10%. I've done that with clients that were earning like 18,000 euros, excuse me, and it was cheaper to do it under the progressive tax rates rather than to do it under the 10% autonomous rate. So you need to see case by case. It's not very straightforward. Also, if you file jointly or if you file with your partner, that will also interfere because it depends on what are the earnings of each one of you. It might be better to file separately. It might be better to file jointly because all that will determine which tax bracket you are and whether it would be better to file first to file jointly or not, and to tax it at the progressive tax rates or tax it at the autonomous rate of 10%. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't have a straightforward answer.
Well, Ricardo, I hope you got the stamina for a bit more, but that's been really good. Thank you. I think it's given us a really good, comprehensive understanding of the general taxation requirements in Portugal. I can see some people applauding you, and I applaud you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm afraid, though, we're going to test you even further. We're going to ask Trevor to take on the talk about US tax, a subject I know nothing about. So I kindly pass you over to Trevor, please, and off you go.
Hi, Ricardo. Welcome to the sponge section. So the big one that comes up is the U.S. Social Security. Is it a pension? Is it 10%? How is that going to play out between NHR and dual taxation treatment?
The Social Security pension, if you earn that pension from private functions, you will have to declare it. First, you will always have to declare it, irrespective of what pension is it. You always have to declare it because in Portugal, you declare your worldwide income. But if that Social Security benefit, it comes from, normally it's based on the age and it's not based on the fact that you worked for a government. So in that case, it's taxed in Portugal, is declared and taxed at 10%. Okay.
Okay. So that's the United States Social Security. Will be back. So if you did your own 401k and you're taking distributions from your own money that you put away pre-tax, is that treated?
You mean like an IRA or a Roth, right?
No, this is just the 401k.
401k, okay.
Which normally similar to an IRA.
If you declare that as a distribution in Portugal under the NHR, this will be not taxed. Okay, if you declare it as a distribution, if you declare it as a pension, it will be taxed at 10%. So normally we declare that as a distribution to avoid taxation.
Right. So the Roth IRA is a little different from the States because that's actually post-tax. Your money is basically a savings account that you're withdrawing with some interest earned tax-free from the States. So how is Portugal going to treat your Roth IRA withdrawal?
If the withdrawal, again, all the withdrawals, we will declare that as its capital distribution and it won't be taxed. It will be declared, but not taxed. Okay?
Yeah. So as far as the US, if you're working for a state government and you're getting a state government pension for years of service, is that taxable?
Always taxable in the country of source, not in Portugal. So with most of the double tax conventions that Portugal has with all countries, when you work for government, either as a salary or a pension, that income is taxed exclusively in the country of source, not in the country where you live. Okay, so in this case, if you worked for the government or for the local council or any other public institution, you should be only taxed in the country of source. And in Portugal, you declare, but you're not taxed.
And you already covered interest income, correct? So
Yeah.
interest income is in source country. And then we just talked about the tax credits. And as far as the dual taxation treaties go, and what you were saying is the NHR, we're not going to take advantage in most cases of the exemptions in Portugal. But how does it work with the Americans get a standard deduction that, you know, where it's, I think it's 4104 here, and it's about 12,600 in the United States. So how does that wash out when you're doing your dual taxation adjustments?
I mean, once you use your NHR expires, or if you don't have the NHR, you will be taxed at the progressive tax rates. And what happens is you declare the tax that you've paid in the country of source. But you need to be careful. Normally, these will be credit against your tax liability in Portugal, but it's not automatically. If I declare, for instance, that you had rental income and that you paid tax on that rental income, and I declare that on your tax return, that credit will be automatically done because they know that normally you pay tax on rentals in the country of source. But other tax credits, they might not be automatic. You might have to apply for the tax residency certificates for the convention too, so that they deduct the tax that you paid in the country of source. For instance, if you say that you have a private pension and that you've paid tax in the UK, I mean in the US, if you declare that in Portugal, the tax authorities will poorly ignore it because they will say that you should have paid it in Portugal where you are resident. So they won't consider that tax credit, and you will have to prove that you've paid that tax. Okay.
Okay. So great. So we're looking to book an appointment with you very quick.
Okay. I'll try to be ready.
Thanks.